The meeting room was packed, a sea of tense, suspicious faces that eyed each other like chess pieces poised for battle. My stomach churned as I realized the accusations of credit theft weren't mere speculation, but tools in a treacherous plot. I stood at the head of the glass table, eyes fixed on the yellowing paper before me, as if it were a shackle binding me. The impact of the words hit me like a punch. Carlos Ramirez, project leader. The project I had conceived and developed over months. My name is Laura, 38, project manager, I repeated mentally, a determined mantra against the whirlwind of emotions. Physical attacks weren't my style. I've always preferred logic over emotion. What I felt now wasn't just indignation, but a burning need to reclaim my truth. They forgot I'm the originator of the idea. The gazes in the room weren't just ready for a debate, they were hunting. Every second I read the expressions unfolding. Carlos tried to mask his glee with a condescending smirk, while Beatrice, his accomplice, displayed calculated apathy. What had changed? I was once praised by them. My trust in them masked their dark intentions. I questioned where I had gone wrong. At what point I let vulnerability replace caution. I maintained my composure, letting my mind organize itself like an agile system. The gears turned, and in that space, new ideas emerged. I could feel the pressure transforming into clarity. A storm doesn't come without warning, I thought. This certainty spread within me as resolution grew. This wasn't just about pride. It was about restoring the integrity of my work and profession. In an almost reflexive act, I raised my voice. I developed this idea. The declaration echoed through the room, and the stares sharpened. Carlos stumbled over his words, trying to minimize the impact of the truth. He quickly spoke of collective merit, but his tone even seemed cynically delighted. Every word was a punch to the gut, but I wouldn't succumb. The room, once a space of collaborative interaction, had become a minefield of intrigue. The atmosphere was electrically charged, and I braced myself for what was to come. Despite the doubt surrounding me, a growing confidence bloomed within. I wasn't just facing injustice, I was about to expose its core. My eyes locked onto Carlos, who was now increasingly aware of the gravity of the situation. He had declared war, and I was determined to win. Not out of ambition, but out of justice. This battle would not end in defeat. I wouldn't let the hard work I invested turn to nothing. The truth was within my grasp, and with each passing day, it became more evident. They forgot I'm the originator of the idea. With this phrase in mind, I began to formulate a plan. The investigation would begin very soon, and they barely knew what was brewing in the shadows. Carlos has always been a shrewd rival. Since the first project we worked on together, his ambition manifested in every gesture and word. While I dedicated myself to building a collaborative environment, he constantly sought to stand out, as if one success depended on the other's downfall. The atmosphere between us became an insidious spiral of competition, where admiration became a distant memory. My friendship with Beatrice started as a breath of fresh air amidst the tension. We were united by a passion for work and the pursuit of excellence, and I trusted her. She shared ideas, laughed at our frustrations, and celebrated small victories. However, as the project evolved, I noticed Carlos subtly infiltrating our dynamic. He praised Beatrice in meetings, trying to seduce her trust, while I felt the space between us narrowing. Every meeting became an arena, with Carlos acting as a gladiator. He subtly challenged my proposals, questioning my methods, and in response, I sought to refute his claims with data and solid results. But what did it matter if he had already cast a shadow of doubt over my authority? My successes were gradually being appropriated by him, and this became more evident each day. One morning, while reviewing notes in my office, Beatrice approached. Carlos asked if you could share your ideas one more time. He thinks we need alignment before the presentation, she said hesitantly. The words resonated in the silent room. Her intentions didn't seem genuine. Why wasn't he contacting me directly? I was irritated. Why doesn't Carlos come talk to me? Is there a problem? The tension in Beatrice's voice indicated she was aware of something I didn't know. He believes you have a lot on your mind and would like to consolidate everything. He just wants to do his best, she replied, but her defense was far from convincing me. I felt something more was at stake. Carlos's manipulation manifested in various ways, but what worried me most was the deterioration of my relationship with Beatrice. The friendship we built was being drained, and each troubled interaction became another obstacle in a battle I hadn't chosen. Sitting at my desk, I looked at the computer screen, where graphs and data were arranged like a mirror reflecting my struggle. Each number told a story, and I wouldn't let those stories be rewritten by Carlos. The only way to assert my place was to gather information and allies to strengthen my case. In the days following my awakening to the betrayal, the atmosphere at the company grew increasingly tense and charged. Interactions with Carlos and Beatrice became a game of chess. Every move I made needed to be calculated. I decided it was time to gather the evidence that would irrefutably confirm my position as the true originator of the project. The time spent collecting this information would be an investment in reclaiming my space. I logged into the project management system, my battlefield. There, I navigated reports and emails, determined to find proof that Carlos's manipulation wasn't just a hunch, but a concrete truth. I had already learned that, as a manager, data transparency was crucial. Now, that same data would become my greatest ally. That morning, while reviewing my inbox, I found an email that caught my attention. It was an email from Carlos to Beatrice mentioning tweaks to my ideas, insinuating that he was just tidying up something that was already mine. The phrase stung, revealing far more than casual disregard. The full intention of rewriting his narrative became visible. Other emails showed the pattern of manipulation I suspected. Every time Carlos tried to claim my contributions as his own, I noted it in my records. What might have been a simple exchange of messages was now the foundation of my defense. I knew I needed to go beyond paper and bring these discoveries to a wider audience. Meeting recordings became the next focus of my investigation. I started revisiting the words spoken in moments that should have been cherished for the team's benefit. Carlos frequently appeared to be taking credit for my contributions. Rage began to build inside me. How could they diminish everything I created? These recordings, presented at the right time, could dismantle every one of Carlos's lies. Anger was now fuel. As I delved into the recordings, I searched for points where Carlos undermined my presence, treating my ideas as mere distractions. What began as a collaborative project had transformed into a battleground where I was determined to win at all costs. Then, finding a moment of quiet, I reflected on the recent dynamics around me. I needed to enlist allies. I started talking to some female colleagues, asking about their own experiences. Most agreed that Carlos frequently claimed their ideas as his own. This recognition was building, and the more I spoke, the stronger the support network became. With each revelation, I built a fortress around myself. The conversations became a fertile ground of information that validated my process. One day, a colleague casually remarked, "Everyone knows you're the head of this project." Her words ignited a fire in me. The truth wasn't just about ownership of ideas. It was a fight for integrity, for all of us. One night, while reviewing emails and recordings, an epiphany struck. Carlos Ramirez's manipulative interactions wove a pattern of polite but malicious behavior. Each meeting where he minimized my contributions, each attempt to rewrite the narrative, solidified the truth in my mind. It was time to take this information and weave it into a presentation that would tell the real story. With everything I'd gathered, I realized I didn't just have an argument. I had an arsenal. The traces of manipulation transformed into a tapestry upon which I could base my appeal for truth. Focusing on Carlos and his web of deceit wasn't just about reclaiming my space. It was about asserting that, even in a hostile environment, integrity and transparency would prevail. Ultimately, every sleepless night and every hour dedicated to research became not just a response to betrayal, but a declaration that I would fight for the truth. They not only forgot I was the originator of the project, but they thought they could silence my voice. The time to act was approaching, and I was ready for the battle for justice that loomed. All my findings and plans would transform into a clamor for the recognition I deserved. As I installed each piece of evidence into my arsenal, I felt stronger. It was only the beginning, but I felt like the tide might finally be turning in my favor. As days bled into weeks, the intensity of my determination only grew. With each new piece of data I collected, the certainty that I was on the right track solidified. It was as if a tide of purpose began to rise within me, and I was ready to ride that wave to expose the truth. The strategy was taking shape. I began compiling all the data I had gathered. The picture of manipulation assembled itself before me, each piece fitting together like a jigsaw puzzle whose final image would reveal not only Carlos's betrayal, but also the nature of the relationships interwoven around me. My eyes moved, frantically over notes as I organized documents, audio, and emails, transforming them into a coherent narrative. One morning, I decided it was time to assemble my findings into a presentation. The plan for what would become a killer defense needed to be presented in a way that everyone involved could understand the extent of what Carlos was doing. I envisioned a meeting where the entire team, including company leadership, could see the exposed truth clearly after the delivery. This visual representation could be the key to significant change. For this, I needed vital and strategic support. I invited some colleagues who also expressed suspicion about the negative dynamic that was setting in. It was time to confront Carlos, not just as individuals, but as a united team fighting for the truth. Building a support network wasn't just about strengthening myself. It was about showing Carlos that his manipulations weren't just being recorded, but also disseminated, reflecting a pattern of actions that couldn't be ignored. We need to expose what's happening, I argued during an informal meeting. Heads nodded, determination reflected on their faces. This isn't just about my project. It's about all of us. If he can silence one of us, he can do it to anyone. I was swept up in a wave of empowerment and solidarity. I knew I had to create a presentation that was irrefutable. For the next few hours, I immersed myself in graphic design to transform the collected data into charts, slides, and infographics that would highlight not only the numbers, but also the hidden messages Carlos had exchanged with Beatrice. Each detail revealed would work like a clip from a film, building a compelling visual and narrative argument. As the slides took shape, the content evolved into a powerful narrative. What had been a solitary quest began to evolve into a collaborative effort. Each of my allies contributed experiences and insights that connected to this larger puzzle. Discussions stretched on as we assembled the presentation. With each new addition, confidence in what we were creating expanded. Then, in one of the meetings, someone suggested, "What if we present this before the official program?" The idea struck a chord. We needed an opportunity to expose Carlos before the execution of his plans. It was a risk, but the adrenaline of immediate action was encouraging. And so, the plan began to take shape. That night, while reviewing the presentation, the image of all those faces suddenly came to mind. I was about to walk into a battleground, and a surge of exhilaration washed over me. I wasn't just fighting for myself. I was fighting for other women who had suffered in silence, for all who hadn't yet found the courage to stand up and say enough. On the appointed day, the atmosphere in the company was electrically charged with tension. A mixture of anticipation and fear seemed to run among us. As I entered the meeting room, everyone fell silent, waiting. My support group and I positioned ourselves firmly in the center. I unleashed feelings and shared the darkness Carlos had caused. The presentation flowed like a river. With each slide, each chart, the portrait became clearer. The circle of lies, constructed by Carlos, began to crumble. Expressions of incomprehension shifted to shock, and in some cases, outrage. With each new revelation, I saw that the words were now taking on a life of their own. The robust truth could not be ignored. Beatrice was among the audience, her features losing their color. I knew Carlos wouldn't be able to withstand what was unfolding. The act of exposing his deception was a transformative step. A key piece in the trap had been removed. Any hope Carlos had of taking credit was swiftly eroded. The climax of my presentation came when I displayed the email exchange between them. A series of whispered conspiracies, a dynamic of betrayal. The room was so silent I could hear the echo of everyone's breaths, holding their emotions. The moment was building. At the end, a ripple of murmurs went through the room. My team's voices began to rise in support. Justice was being served. Carlos was cornered and powerless, and around him came the realization that his tactics were transparent. We're not just here for a project. We're here for our dignity, for the truth. I finished, almost breathless, but resolute. This wasn't just about me. It was about the future of teamwork, where respect must prevail. The room erupted in applause, and even with Carlos's despairing presence, there was a resounding sense of victory. It was only the beginning of a new chapter. I hadn't just fought for my truth, but for the truth of everyone around me. I felt my narrative finally beginning to shine in the light. They'd forgotten I was the originator of the project, and now the truth was coming to light. The silence that followed the end of my presentation was thick with tension. Carlos, once so self-assured and charismatic, now looked small under the collective gaze of the people who had once admired his projection. The indignation in his eyes betrayed what he'd just heard. I'd finished the presentation, but the fight was only beginning. The applause directed at me felt like a wave of liberation. My colleagues rose, and the room filled with a sense of collective unity, something I hadn't consciously sought. This wasn't just about protecting my work. It was a powerful statement that betrayals in collaborative environments would no longer be tolerated. Carlos tried to regain his composure, rising to claw back the words from his mouth like a splinter in a wound. "This is unacceptable," he began, his voice trembling with barely contained rage. "These are unfounded accusations, and you're twisting the truth." His desperation was plain, a last-ditch act of a cornered player. But the room was no longer on his side. What had previously been a captive audience now watched with disbelief his hollow rhetoric. Beatrice, who had previously been his staunch ally, remained silent, her face etched with confusion. The justice I had recently sought was beginning to materialize before my eyes. "You think you can simply erase the truth with your speech?" I asked, not avoiding his gaze. "Here's the evidence, Carlos. Here's the proof that each of you has a duty to acknowledge. These emails, these recordings, it's all documented. What wasn't just a corporate presentation was becoming an act of resolution. Ouroboros, the company I worked for, had always been a bastion for innovation. But innovation could only thrive in an environment of respect and honesty. It was time to make that reality pulse and amplify the relationships built on distrust or competition, and dismantle the games Carlos played daily. I realized this was a chance to dismantle not just an individual narrative, but the very pattern of betrayals that might be masquerading in workplace relationships. It wasn't enough to expose Carlos. I needed to ensure such behavior didn't become an accepted norm. I needed to be the change I wished to see. The conversations around me began to heat up. Some colleagues, initially nervous, started to stand up, share experiences, and push back against the manipulation they'd witnessed. "Carlos, you've been hitting the wall of everyone's integrity," said a former colleague. "We expected You to use your talent to lift us up, not tear us down. I realized that what was forming was a wave of questioning that Carlos couldn't handle. He looked around, searching for support that was no longer there. What had been a one-dimensional power cave was now transforming into a temple of honesty and transparency. "Let me be clear," Carlos said, almost failing to grasp the gravity of his situation. "This presentation is just a game. If you're trying to hurt me, you'll be at a disadvantage." "Disadvantage?" "Everyone here is embracing this journey of discovery," I replied, enveloping the room in an atmosphere of shared solidarity. All eyes were on me, and the energy of the room shifted in favor of the truth. "I'm not here to diminish anyone, but to reclaim the dignity of the work everyone has done. We can't allow your manipulations to become the norm." The room instantly resonated with energies moving in my direction, as if a political field were at play. Several of my colleagues started to align, firm in their stance. Carlos tried to counter, but his stammering speech began to lose its impact amidst the clamorous evidence of what was happening. Once more, I raised my voice. "What matters here isn't me or even you, Carlos. What prevails is respecting the work, acknowledging achievements, and preventing ambition from becoming a poison to the work environment." These words reverberated through the room, a cry of truth that would echo. We were starting to unite in defense of what truly mattered. The atmosphere in the office had palpably shifted. Walls that once felt oppressive now vibrated with the energy of a revitalized team that had decided not only to support the truth, but to champion it within the company structure. As I walked the halls, I noticed encouraging whispers and nods of camaraderie. We were no longer just colleagues. We were advocates for a new culture striving to take root in honor and transparency. Following the presentation, company guidelines became a topic of discussion. The consequences of Carlos's actions became a central theme, not only in meetings, but also in the informal conversations that pulsed throughout the department. Management had decided to open an internal investigation into the actions of Carlos and Beatriz, and it was now clear that the light of truth could no longer be extinguished. I couldn't stand still. It was time to move forward and prepare for every next step. The drive to defend my truths and ensure the lessons we learned weren't forgotten guided me. Soon, I called a meeting with company leadership. Anticipation hung in the air as I prepared to present my findings in detail. I was ready to explain not only Carlos's betrayal, but also the implications it could have on the culture at Ouroboros. I wanted to ensure that the story of manipulation didn't end in mere punishment, but resulted in real changes in the company's collaborative environment. With a racing heart, I entered the conference room, armed with my slides, charts, and the narrative I had woven. "Thank you for having me," I began, trying to keep confidence in my voice. "Today, I hope to portray not only Carlos's actions, but the impact they had on our team, and how we can use this to strengthen our guidelines and integrity." Each slide I presented, from Carlos's initial betrayal in the exchange of ideas to the development of a space for the team's voice to be heard, brought to the surface the need for transformation. Surprise gasps turned into expressions of reflection. These were employees who had felt vulnerable, but now were uniting around the idea of improving the environment they worked in. "This isn't a conversation about a single mistake, but about our approach to teamwork," I continued, with determination. "We need mechanisms to ensure our interactions are based on respect and honesty. We can't allow personal ambition to overshadow the recognition of collective work." Discussions around the table swirled, and the effectiveness of what I was presenting began to spread like wildfire. Management reacted positively, and some voices began to support the idea of internal policy reform. This not only relieved pressure in the environment, but also brought new parameters so that no more lies would take root in daily interactions. As the mood improved, I focused on the crucial part of the meeting, the consequences to be imposed on Carlos and Beatriz. After careful consideration, it became clear that the company would need to address the consequences delicately, but firmly. so that everyone saw that the truth would not only be tolerated, but protected. I propose we take appropriate measures, involving a reassessment of their responsibilities on the team, I stated, in consensus with the new reality we were creating. Carlos can be a valuable addition, but he needs to be held accountable for his actions. The absence of these consequences would send the wrong message to everyone. The room buzzed. Some team members whistled their approval, others murmured in surprise. The idea of holding someone once respected accountable was a minefield, but the need to uphold integrity prevailed. Management's decision was swift. While discussions continued, Carlos was temporarily relieved of his responsibilities, while the investigation proceeded. Beatrice, who seemed to be overheated due to her actions, was also notified of the need for consultations and amends. After the transformative meeting, the atmosphere at Ouroboros pulsed with collaboration and respect. Voices once silenced, fearful of being ignored, now found resonance in open discussions. The monthly meetings I implemented became a safe space where everyone could share their ideas and concerns without fear. Each meeting was a reminder that we were together in building a healthier environment. With these changes, solidarity became evident. Colleagues who previously hesitated to speak up now rallied together to offer support to one another. I remember when a colleague brought a groundbreaking idea to the table for the first time. The encouragement and admiration from everyone showed that creativity was welcome. It was a moment that symbolized the new dynamic of our team. The impact of the presentation and the subsequent management decisions spread like wildfire within the company. Carlos's departure became a focal point of discussion on ethics and responsibility. The implementation of training made it clear that ambition couldn't overshadow respect, and the responsibility of helping maintain this new culture became my mission. Carlos. Now a negative example. No longer a respected colleague, but a lesson on the dangers of unchecked ambition. Beatrice, on the other hand, was in a process of rehabilitation. I decided to give her a chance to redeem herself, inviting her to participate in the feedback meetings and offering the opportunity to share her experiences. This would not only help her rebuild trust, but also show that the path to reparation could be followed. The results began to show. The culture of support and collaboration was bearing fruit. Conversations became more open. Ideas once lukewarm now bubbled amongst the team. The fear that previously dominated dissipated, allowing all employees to feel integral to the change process. As the team worked united, I realized my fight wasn't just for justice in an isolated case. It was the defense of a new standard in our company. Instead of merely exposing the betrayal, I had transformed the situation into an opportunity for growth and learning. One afternoon, looking out my office window, I saw groups of colleagues, gathered, sharing ideas, laughing, and building connections. The atmosphere that was once oppressive now resonated with an optimistic and innovative buzz. A true revolution was underway, and I was at its heart. It was then that I realized that change, though initiated by my fight for the truth, had become a collective movement. What was once my personal issue now belonged to everyone. Each person was committed to ensuring that what we had achieved wouldn't be forgotten. Ouroboros would no longer be just a tech company. It was shaping itself to become an example of a DAO. Healthy work environment, challenging old norms, and implementing transparent practices at all levels. The company also became a place where ethics were a fundamental value, not just a policy to follow, but something ingrained in the day-to-day operations. The weight of the fight I had undertaken transformed into a growing gratitude. The battle for truth wasn't a mere act of exposing. It was about building an empowering space for everyone. It was the beauty of transforming adversity into synergy. As I prepared for the next meeting, a wave of accomplishment washed over me. I knew the battle for integrity and respect wouldn't end here, but I was determined to continue the fight. They might have forgotten that I'm the originator of the project, but now the truth was our ally. The future I envisioned was one of collaboration, where honesty was the foundation of all actions. The journey was just beginning, and I was ready to face any challenge that arose. Not in the way Carlos did, but with courage, solidarity, and a firm commitment to the truth. It was a new chapter, and the story of Ouroboros's transformation was only just beginning.